we are back with Sanho, and we're taping this on Sunday, late afternoon, early evening. Yesterday was an interesting performance. I say interesting; it was a nice performance. We played very well. So, Sanho, why don't you give me your thoughts on what you saw yesterday in that BC game?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, it's obviously really encouraging to see the team play that well. I was thrilled especially for the players, to see the crowd seem to be in it, even though the crowd was a little bit less than it is, I think, well, definitely less than it was in the opener, but the crowd seemed to be in it the whole time. We didn't get boos right away. And they obviously played well. It felt nice to see that happen, and it was great to see, the potential thing they know that the team has realized, even though it was not a great opponent. It was great to see the team play so well, because we all know that's all sort of what we're fighting for is, even whatever side of the argument you're on is like, I want to see what we know we have be demonstrated on the field. So it was great to see that. But it was sort of, for me at least, it was kind of bittersweet in that it was equal parts frustrating when you think, well, last week we had a similarly disadvantaged opponent and we couldn't do this, not because we were not capable, but because we just chose not to. So it was really hard to put those two together and think through like this is great to watch, but why didn't this happen the previous week, and why did we and even against Hawaii, why was it not? Why we weren't being this aggressive and this trustworthy of our players? It seems very strange. Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I thought the same thing. I was watching it going, this is not the same. This isn't even the same playbook. You're watching this stuff happen, and it wasn't just, this opponent's dictating different things. It was just he's calling different things. And I kind of agree with your point about, it being sort of focused on critics, and maybe that is or maybe that isn't the case. But I really thought that first pass attempt going vertical was like a statement of, yeah, no, I get it, we're going to do something different. And it really felt like there was, based on the crowd's reaction, that there was some communication there between the coach and the observers of the program, or the people who have a stake in the program. It was interesting to me to see that and go, okay, he's kind of making a statement of, this is not going to be like it was, or I get it, or yeah, fine, here it is. Here's what you want. However you feel about Kiff is, I guess, how you translate what that meant. But yeah, it was really nice to see, and it worked so well, and all of that. I mean, I'm still, to me, I'm sure we'll get into this, but it still feels like a blip, less more than a trend. But that'll be, we'll know that in another 6 or 7 games.
Yeah, I that's definitely the case, and we have two back-to-back games coming up here that will tell us a lot, because I think as we've discussed last week, these teams that we're about to play are probably a good notch above the teams we've played so far. I don't. So, and even Utah State, I think they're pretty good. Before we move on to what we're looking ahead to, why don't you give any thoughts you have on certain player performances or certain other aspects that you saw that you found interesting from yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I hope I can add some kind of insight to the stuff that isn't already obvious. I mean, you watch the way our front seven is playing, and it's just it's so exciting. I mean, Leonard Williams is tearing it up. Uko's making good plays. Breslin and Kennard are just forces. They are just even if they're not making a huge play, they're just disrupting things all the time. And Bailey's doing really well. We haven't even really got into how good Cravens has played so far in his first few games.
Yeah, I don't think we've mentioned him, and he has been absolutely great. And you see he missed one or two tackles yesterday. He could have made even bigger plays. He's going to be a really phenomenal player.
Oh, I'm so excited about his future because, yeah, even in his first game, I was amazed at how good he was. And not only, obviously, like, he's got a lot of talent, and he's playing really well, and he's not making any, like, obvious mistakes. But it's also, like, it's really refreshing to see us just schematically. We have a safety who's around making plays near the line of scrimmage, and it's not just this umbrella coverage where, we take this great athlete and we just make him make sure that nobody completes a 60-yard pass on us.
The joke used to be that that safety you could just have a lawn chair sitting 40 yards behind the line of scrimmage watching the game with a big gulp.
It looked much more like the Troy Polamalu version of the safety in the USC defense than it did like the Taylor Mays version where you take this guy and he's just standing way, way back. So that's great. I mean, it feels like we have playmakers all over the field on defense. I mean, Pollard, I love. Bailey is such a good playmaker. Love him. The corners haven't been. I mean, the level of competition isn't that great, but the corners haven't been exposed quite as badly as I thought. Utah State is definitely going to be a test in that regard. We can't even talk. I guess if we're going to talk about the last game, you have to talk about how well the running backs played. Davis, to me, looks like he really kind of has something special in him. Madden that guy, he reminds me a little bit of Marshawn Lynch just because he just like constantly tries. He does not give up on a play until the whistle's blown, and you have to respect that level of effort. And there's just a lot of grit with him. I like him a lot. Davis, he looks like he's still got to grow into his body a little bit, but there's something like in the open field, he's a unique running back.
He is. It was pointed out. I mean, by Rich, and I think this is a great comment that he has an ability to see to the next defender upfield, and he's already making moves based upon two guys missing. He actually reminds me a lot of Stephon Johnson, but I know Orenthal disagreed with that assessment. I think he does remind me of Stephon Johnson, but actually potentially more athletic version of him. So he's an interesting runner.
Yeah, a really interesting runner, and I think there's some old quote. It might even be from OJ, but it's this a great runner already knows he's going to beat the first guy and assumes he's going to beat that first guy, and he's thinking about his move, how best to beat that first guy to set up to beat the next guy he's going to try and beat. It's like It's a much better quote than what I just said, but I agree with that. It does look like he's one of these guys he's got such good vision of the field that he's seeing more than just the guy in front of him. I don't want to knock any SC players, but I thought Ronald Johnson, as great of an athlete as he was, he just could not consistently beat the first guy, And once you saw Robert Woods or Damian Williams, even you saw that maybe not even as good an athlete as Ronald Johnson, but they were able to beat that first guy and be able to capitalize on their natural athleticism. Mm-hmm. Better than Rojo was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a couple numbers here. Looking at them, so Boston College only had 184 yards. 68 of those, so more than a third, were on that touchdown drive where we basically had our backups in. Right. Our defense is now ranked, in terms of yardage, 4th in the country. And we're giving up 212 yards a game. And again, we have a couple. That includes a couple big plays where basically we had mainly the 2s on the field, maybe in some cases 3s. So, it's while our defense has performed. Now, granted, these are not premier offenses we're going against. However, the defense has performed at a premier level so far. So you got to be excited about that. Our running game looked decent in all 3 games, but it looked really strong against Boston College for what it's worth.
And the blocking looked great. I mean, that was the thing I was probably the most encouraged about, is that the run blocking was. I mean, our guys weren't getting hit until they were, either into the hole or past it. And I haven't seen run blocking like that in a while. And yeah, like you say, it's not great competition, but neither was Hawaii, and neither was Washington State. And I don't think I didn't feel like I witnessed the same level of run blocking in those games. So to me, that's an encouraging sign as well.
Yeah, a couple thoughts I had because one of the themes I've seen people write about is that, and obviously we don't agree with this, but the big issue plaguing USC's offense is not only the blocking of the front five, but also penalties on the offensive line, or just general stupid, kind of mental error penalties. What's interesting is that against Boston College, we had more penalties, and we had quite a few outright line breakdowns, especially early in the game. Lots of line breakdowns, lots of penalties on the offensive line, and yet this was the game where we actually were able to get it going on offense. And it goes to show that yes, you don't want penalties. They reflect poorly on your team. You want your team to be executing beyond stupid mental error penalties. You never want breakdowns on the offensive line. You want guys covering their assignments. However, in a global sense, what's going to dictate how strong your offense performs is not really going to be breakdowns on the offensive line and penalties, because those plays don't represent what happens on a play-to-play basis. They're kind of like, even if they happen very, very often, maybe 20% of the time you'll get a line breakdown or a penalty. Whereas if you're just not calling offensive, you have not structured your offense, you're not calling offensive plays 100% of the time that are confusing the defense, your offense is never going to work.
Yeah, you watch. I mean, we probably cost ourselves not only just with the yards and the penalties, but we probably cost ourselves 3 or 4 good offensive, positive plays with the penalties, but the team still produced and still overcame and stuff. And that to me is evidence of it's kind of like you're saying. It's not just that penalties aren't just that cost you. They will cost. They cost you certainly in either respect. But if in one hand you can overcome them if you're still got a good offensive flow going, you can still produce at a pretty high level. We probably could have put up some more points had we not had some of those penalties. But when things get really bad and you go, well, if we had, and everybody starts playing that, well, if A, B, or C went different, they start doing with penalties. To me, that again, kind of like you're indicating, doesn't address the core issue. It's if we didn't have this BS pass interference penalty, or if we didn't have this BS holding penalty, then X, Y, and Z would have happened. We would have been fine. But X, Y, and Z can still happen. That's what this game looks like. It's you can still do those things. I mean, it may have a penalty can certainly stall a drive, but for the overall for the whole game, those penalties aren't the things that are the reason that cause you to score 10 points against a weak opponent.
Right.
There's larger issues than just 8 penalties for 80 yards or whatever it is.
Right. Okay. Well, let's look ahead a little bit here. We have Utah State coming up. I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at the results from their first 3 games. They lost a tight game to Utah. Utah actually lost in overtime yesterday to Oregon State at home. Everyone kind of assumes Oregon State is, going into the season, Oregon State was was supposed to be probably the best team in the conference after Oregon and Stanford. Now they obviously haven't performed that way, but now this is a typical Mike Riley to perform poorly in the beginning of the season and then to get it going. So it's you're not sure exactly how good Utah is. Utah squeaked it out against Utah State. It was a very tough game. It was a revenge game for the Utes. They had lost to Utah State the previous year, and they were able to get the win in a very close fashion. The next week, Utah State goes to Air Force and just kills the Falcons. Air Force played Boise State pretty tough this week in Boise. I say all these things because you never want to. It's very tough to play the what is it? What is the saying? The transitive property doesn't work in college football, but it is good to see who your teams how they've played against different opponents as you come into the game and get a sense of how strong these teams are. And then this week, Utah State had kind of an easier game against Weber State and just absolutely crushed them. So they've got this quarterback, Chucky Keaton. He's looked pretty legit as a fairly elite type college football quarterback. So he can do things with his feet. He can do things with his arm. It's going to be an interesting challenge for us this week.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think this is a huge leap up in quality in terms of the passing attack we're going to face. Even like Washington State is certainly a unique challenge too, but that's more. It's less based on the talent of the quarterback and more about just we're constantly going to have like four or five corners out there trying to defend all these guys, and they have a short passing game, whatever. This is I can't claim to have like watched any film on Utah State, but their quarterback has put up some startling numbers. I mean, he had 5 touchdowns and I think like almost 250 yards in just the first half last week. I mean, it's Weber State, but I mean that's
and I don't think he played at all in the second half. I mean, it was like one of those Marcus Mariota type of performances where everything happens in the first half.
Yeah, and then the previous week, I'm pretty sure he had 5 touchdowns too. So that's a guy who's going to be, obviously, we're going to be step up in competition for them as well, and our defense is probably going to give him far less time than he's used to. So you have to wonder how it'll affect the expectations that they have. But if you look at, I was going over the numbers with a friend of mine. I wish I had him in front of me so I could just quote him. But over the last 6 or 7 games of theirs, I think they'd only scored under 30 points maybe once against Utah, and then their defense is actually. Scoring wise has actually done okay. I'm sure their level of competition isn't that great, but it's going to be. I think this is the first kind of notch up from where who we've faced already. And I watched the ASU game last night. They're they're obviously our game after Utah State, and they look pretty good, but I wasn't really impressed with them.
I was actually a little disappointed. I was expecting ASU to really have a really strong team and to come out and just kind of blow the doors off Wisconsin, who I thought would not have the same level of talent just because of all the junior college guys that ASU have been able to recruit the last couple of years. But I didn't get that sense from watching them.
Yeah, they didn't look like a well-oiled machine at all. I mean, they've certainly got some issues. It's going to – I mean, that's – I think – I don't know. It's hard to say because you don't want to put it – my guess right now is that Utah State and then at Arizona State are, one notch up is Utah State and then another half notch up from that is ASU. And if it was a home game against ASU, I'd probably put the challenge of the game of Utah State and Arizona State around the same level.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's so hard to get a good. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of confused about what we can expect now because. We've seen these two underperformances. One terrible underperformance against Washington State, and now it looked like we did pretty well. But on the other side of it, I try to, think of it from the opposite perspective. If I was going to say that the game against Boston College wasn't that good, it was or there's reasons to know that it wasn't that good. The way I would approach it is saying, okay, they're not a good opponent. The stats are a bit misleading. We ran all over them and blah blah blah, but they're playing in the Coliseum where we were going to change our scheme. The results were going to necessarily be better. And then the other thing too is, as much as I loved Kessler's stats, I loved his completion percentage. He looked like he was taking shots downfield. I mean, I think it was just literally the one play, but just the fact that we threw to the tight end in the middle of the field.
Yeah, we ran a tight. We finally ran. I mean, this is something I don't think Kiffin's ever run this in 4 years. The tight end pop off a fake zone read play, which is like a base play in virtually every other college football team's program is to throw that tight end pop. We had not, I don't think, run it in 4 years, and then we finally ran one to Gremlin against 20 yards.
Yeah, it was such a relief to see and just say, oh my gosh, we do have that play. We recognize that there's a middle of the field, and we have this great athlete at tight end that we can use.
It's funny. I have a feeling that play is going to turn out to be like a team that does the double reverse on a kickoff against Appalachian Tech or something. So they do that just so it's on film, so every team has to practice against it. I don't know if we'll ever see that play again, but I'll hold out hope.
Right now, yeah, everybody's on notice that we know we have tight ends, so now we're prepared for it. We'll never use it again, right? So and then the other thing I was going to say about the Kessler stats is they're a bit misleading. Like that 80-yard touchdown pass to Lee, which was a great play, but that was, to me, it looked like a complete screw up on the part of the Boston College defense. I mean, he ran a pretty basic out the DB took a bad angle and then he just ran straight. I mean, it wasn't like we schemed our way into this wide open space and blah blah blah.
No, that was our athlete. Our athletes are better than your athletes.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that sort of skews the yardage stats for Kessler a little bit. But whatever, great completion percentage. He really didn't miss a pass all day. I don't know if you want to get into this at all, but one of the things I did think was a little bit odd was pulling Kessler near the end of the game, with 9 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. I know we were playing a lot of backups at that point, but that struck me as a little bit strange. Just because, this is Kessler's first full start. And I would have thought, let's try and keep him in the game the whole time. And let's see him, get to finish a full game. I exchanged posts with a lot of people about this. I think I'm in the minority on it. But I really did think that, we were going to kind of you're our guy. And there's going to be kind of a sort of vote of confidence thing to let him finish the game. Maybe build his stats or maybe, whatever, finish on the field with his teammates or what have you. But whatever, we went the other way, and it doesn't make a difference to this game, but I did think it was kind of one of those things that I thought was a little curious. And as we talked about before, I think that Kiffin doesn't have this great sense of the emotional side of the game, and that was one of those moves that kind of reaffirmed my thinking on that, whereas, if he was really thinking from the perspective of Kessler here, maybe he would say, we're going to give him another couple series. We'll wait till there's 4 minutes left in the game. Because I didn't see the real benefit of bringing Wittek in other than to protect Kessler from getting hurt, because they only let Wittek attempt 2 passes, right?
Yeah.
So you get the gain of preserving Kessler, but at the same time, you just decided to make this guy your starter, 4 days ago. So it's not like you're, preventing Drew Brees from getting injured. You're there might be more gain to be had here by keeping him in the game. Was the way I analyzed it.
Right.
What
Well,
do you think about that?
I think, and pretty sure that one of the messages. Well, look, at that point, I think we had pulled basically all our starters on defense the series before, and they had gone down and scored pretty quickly. Maybe I think he was sending a message really more to Wittek than to Kessler. The message being like, "Hey, just so you know, I'm still thinking about you. I haven't forgotten about you, man. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna put you in at a time in the game when if you throw the ball, now we're only ahead by 21. So if you throw a pass, it doesn't look like I'm trying to run up the score. It just looks like we're just playing football. But that's something. That's a message that's not only going to get to Wittek, it's going to get to Kessler too. It's one of these things that I don't know. I think you can argue both ways. I'm more concerned because we did not use the first 2 games to kind of establish Kessler as just like a guy who could throw the ball. A guy that we have confidence in, that he will be permitted to throw passes, and passes for big passes for first downs, passes where we need big yards. We basically punted on that. I mean, to use a football metaphor, unfortunately, we punted on the issue of whether or not Kessler is going to be a real quarterback for the first 2 games. So yesterday was the first time we actually put Kessler in a position that he was going to be making legitimate Pac-12 level, legitimate NCAA college football throws. So,
Yes.
Him going early, I guess it would have been nice if we could have kept him in a little bit to hey, look, why don't you show us what you can do a little bit here? We're going to let you make a couple more throws. One thing I did notice, we had put Kessler in the shotgun a lot in the first 2 games. I think he's probably. You would think he'd be more comfortable in the shotgun because of that's how he played in high school. In the All-Star game, I never thought he looked comfortable taking the ball from center. However, he didn't look really comfortable in those first 2 games. Yesterday, he took everything almost exclusively from center, and he looked comfortable. But I think the reason he looked comfortable was because he was actually being permitted to throw passes like a real quarterback. He wasn't being told, hey, just turn to your side and throw the ball 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage to Aguilar. Try and squeeze that pass in before the crashing defensive lineman either knocks the ball down or tackles the receiver before the ball gets there. It would have been nice to let him get comfortable being just like kind of a quarterback who you put him in shotgun for a few plays. Let's see what kind of throws he can make because I think that's going to come up here in the next couple of games. I'm almost positive where we are going to need Kessler to make big throws big passing plays on clear passing downs to win the game, and he's never really done that yet. He's not. I guess the one exception is that the end of that first half drive against Hawaii. He made some throws, but otherwise he really hasn't done it. And it would have been nice to use that extra time in the fourth quarter yesterday for him to have throws like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough because I agree with your sense that, you don't go through a whole season without being kind of in a hole and needing to come back. You can look at that Alabama game, and I don't think A.J. McCarron is an elite quarterback, but they were in a position where Manziel was bringing the ball down and scoring. It looked like they might have put up 60 points after the first two drives.
Right. And
McCarron was able to react and respond, and I think part of that is you don't get to that place with a quarterback with the skill level of A.J. McCarron unless you've you put him in a lot of situations and done a lot of things with him prior to that point. That resilience, I think, is years in the making. And to your point, I think we missed a little bit of an opportunity to do that with Kessler. We are going to, I think in the next 2 or 3 games, we're going to see our offense put in a position that we need to score on this drive before this game gets out of control. And then if we don't, and they do end up scoring again, then they're going to know what's coming every time. So just to keep this game, just to keep it, there's some kind of guesswork on defense, we have to score now,
Yeah.
And how they respond in that situation is going to be really interesting. And you've got a quarterback that's pretty green, both because of, how we kind of handled this quarterback competition, and then also the way we sort of allocated play time, snaps or whatever once the season started. So
yeah, it is a different thing. It's a different thing to attempt to pass when it's a very close game and you're in the first 2.5 quarters of the game, and either you have the threat of play action, you have you can always check down to shorter receivers if you need to. That's a very different type of pressure to place on a quarterback than putting them in late third, fourth quarter. They need to make this pass on an obvious passing situation, and it's Kessler still because of the quarterback competition, because of we didn't use the opportunities. He hasn't had that yet. So hopefully he'll react well when it comes up. We'll have to see, I guess.
Yeah, he has to get up to speed more quickly. Is sort of the end of it. It's like your family went on vacation the week before the SATs. You have 2 days to study now. Get as much in your head as you possibly.
Right, you get crammed. All right. Well, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up for this post BC game?
Yeah, I guess. I would just be it seems like the boards have flipped a little bit. Like we went from 50-50 after leading into the Washington State game to like 98-2. Everybody's ready to get rid of Kiffin. Now we've switched back to, it seems like 70-30. He's gone. I'd be careful about swaying our opinions that strongly based on just this immediate result. Certainly it's possible, I guess, that he could go on this run. But if you look at his overall record, I didn't reach the conclusion. Step back a minute. I didn't reach my conclusion after Washington State that he was done because of that one game. It was the accumulation of a lot of things. You need sort of the accumulation of another set of things to sway that back is how I kind of approach this stuff. So,
I'll let you continue, but this was like my whole point leading into the season. Even to point last season, which is what is it that Lane could possibly show us to indicate that he's not going to just win one occasional game or a few occasional games, but he's going to be an elite college football coach. And, this one game is not it.
Well, and in fact, the other thing I'd say, too, is if you look at how we played and the type of game plan we put in against Washington State, and then you look at what we did in Boston College, that looks like a team that just does not have an identity. You shouldn't be able to switch that drastically from one week to the next. And like you said, in one game we are all about the horizontal pass game. That is the majority of our offense. And in the very next game, it's almost none of our offense. And to me, that says something about how you approach the question of what is our identity. And I think he's still approaching it from the perspective of a guy who's got Dwayne Jarrett and Steve Smith and Reggie Bush and Lendale White and Dominic Byrd and Matt Leinart, and you can do whatever you want. So from week to week, you can just decide to use whatever amazing strength you have to attack the opponent's weakness. And I think what he's doing, it's sort of too broad. You've got too broad of a pool of things that you're drawing on to sort of demonstrate or state what your identity is. It's as effective as it was this week. You look at it and you go like, we have too many kind of versions of what we are. If last week we were this one thing and then this week we are this complete opposite thing. Like, you have to give him credit for changing and adapting, but it's sort of like you get painted into a corner and then only then you come out with this thing that is unlike what you just did.
Yeah.
It's really inconsistent, wildly inconsistent, and it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in what he's going to do. It's like, well, you found the answer this week, but with that problem that was demonstrated in the transition from week to week still is a big problem. And when maybe the heat's off in a couple weeks, he's won a few games, what is he going to do then? It feels like the problems that exist still are very much there. And what we didn't see was the evidence of like, oh, he gets it. It was the evidence of, yeah, well, when there's no other options, he'll do the right thing or whatever.
Right.
It just didn't seem like the satisfying answer we all want.
Right. And he wasn't exactly too forthcoming in his post-game interviews about recognizing the changes that had been made either. Well, we will see. We'll have to see how it goes. Can't pick against USC, so I'll pick them against Utah State, although I have a feeling this is going to be a tough game.
I think it's going to be really close, to be honest with you. I think that for the first time, our defense is going to I don't want to say show signs of weakness, but it'll probably give up a little bit more yards and be a little bit less dominant. And our offense is going to have to rise to that challenge. Now, maybe what that will do to Kiffin is, it will be very much unlike the Washington State game where he felt, well, our defense is dominating so much, I'll just go into a shell. Maybe that will cause him to be more aggressive and it'll be fine. But yeah, I feel like it's going to be a tighter game than we want it to be. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I'm thinking like it's going to be within 10 points. And then we'll see. I think last week I may have even said it was either going to be a loss or Arizona State was going to be a loss. I'm not too budged off that position right now, but we'll see.
Yeah, nor am I. All right. Well, we'll have to see, and we'll talk next week. Thanks a lot, Senko, for joining us.